Hey, Steve.
Hey Lisa, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm really hoping that spring arrives in Toronto because we got snow today in March.
Wow, crazy. Yeah, I mean, I thought spring had arrived here in London, but it was here for 3 days and it's gone.
Yeah.
It's back to
It
being
made its
cold.
appearance in Toronto too, but then it sneaks away. It's
We'll
teasing.
keep our fingers crossed. It's not too far away.
Yeah. Okay, so today we're talking about self-esteem and self-confidence. That's juicy
Yeah,
topic.
I know. Everyone wants self-esteem and self-confidence, don't they? So it's a good topic to dive into.
It's probably one of the main things that people talk to me in coaching. It tends to come up some way or another. And so I was just mentioning to you, I actually had to look up what the definition of self-confidence versus self-esteem is. So do you want to
Mhm.
take a crack at it, having not checked it and
Yeah,
not?
having not looked, yeah, having not looked it up. Yeah, I'll have a go. I think for me, self-confidence is around kind of, I would say, comes from our level of sort of experience and skill in something that gives us a sense of yeah, knowledge, or a sense of, I want to say confidence, but that kind of goes against what we're trying to explain. But yeah, I'd say self-confidence often is that kind of sense of experience and skill that gives you that ability to move forward without maybe anxiety. And then I think self-esteem is more around, I guess, our sense of self, like our actual sense of self acceptance, self love. Um, yeah, that's how I'd probably try and differentiate it.
Well, you are a smart man because absolutely right. So self-confidence, I'm just reading the note that I put down for myself, is a trust in our ability. It's in
Mm,
a particular arena, in a particular area. It's outwardly focused. And self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves, our trust in ourselves, and it's inwardly focused. It's our almost like a self-worth
yeah,
measure,
got it.
how we feel.
Got
So
it.
I love that you knew that. And I would say if I'm thinking about myself, I think I'm pretty good on the self-confidence side. Like I have confidence in my abilities in certain areas for sure. In most areas, I kind of believe I would figure it out. I might not be the
Mhm.
best, but I could figure it out. I think self-esteem has been a longer kind of process for me in the sense that I still see myself attaching my worthiness, even though when I go deeper, I know it's not true, but I still feel in my behavior sometimes an attachment to external validation around income, what I do for a living, versus feeling completely worthy and valuable outside of any of that. So yeah,
Wow.
how does it land for you, either of those?
Yeah, I think probably quite similar. I think self-confidence, again, if I'm in an area that I'm familiar with and I've got the skill set or something, then I would say confidence is high. And sometimes, even if it's something I'm not familiar with, I think if you're confident in lots of other areas, or you've done something that's given you confidence, you can often apply it elsewhere because your body remembers, like taking a risk or doing something crazy, and realizing it was fine in the end. So I think because you've got that learned experience, it helps generally. So I think I'm the same. My self-confidence is probably relatively high in some areas, but there are areas that it's not, and maybe we'll come back to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, self-esteem right now, today, I would say it's high, but it hasn't always been it. That's really come probably the last few years.
Mhm.
Even throughout my 20s and 30s, I would say on the outside, people would assume I had high self-esteem just based on how I appeared, just my level of outgoing confidence, that people would think, oh, he's got high self-esteem, but deep down, probably not. It was maybe somewhat an act to a degree, or trying to be something, trying to push through. Um, and yeah, it took a long time, I think, to get what I said earlier, that kind of sense of, I guess, acceptance
Yeah.
for what is true acceptance without the other thing. So Just very quickly, when I think back to my 20s or 30s, a lot of the things that were giving you a sense of self-esteem were actually a fake sense of self-esteem. I think it's whether it was your job, starting to earn good money, your looks, even, how you look, or things like that can give you a fake sense of self-esteem. People would tell you, oh, you're doing really well, or you look good, or you this or that, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm feeling self-esteem. And actually, when you get still, you realize, oh, not really. you know so, and that's the trick. It's like working out what is the real sense of self acceptance versus the false sense.
Hmm. Yeah, well, and society in general kind of reinforces this connection to these these outward measures, right? Rather than
Mhm.
this self-esteem, which is almost, I love how you said self-acceptance. It's accepting all parts of ourselves, our strengths, because we all have them, but our non-strengths, our darkness, our messes, our failures, our gaps, like all of that exists too in all of us, right? I was sharing with a client this morning that, we are all perfect and also a work in progress. And that's a big paradox of life, that we are exactly where we're meant to be, and all is well. And we are always growing and always a work in progress. And we need to accept both of those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I see that as well. And I think that was something I used to fall foul to a bit, was always striving to be something better. Or if I just read that next book or go on this next course or do this, then I will be good enough, whatever good enough means. But then I think that's a trick as well, because the more you do that, the more you want to do more, and it's like a never-ending cycle. So I think the best thing I've realized is just get to a bottom line of saying, right, today I'm accepting what is. Like today I'm accepting everything that's ever happened to me, everything that's ever good and bad that's happened, everything I've done. Because I've even the things you've done wrong, you didn't know better, or you learned from, right? So I think if you can just, whether it's today or tomorrow, you can just baseline that and say, I'm good enough now. Anything from here is a bonus in learning more about myself. But if I just accept fully myself and tell myself that regularly, really believe it, not just say it, believe it, you can start to kind of, I don't know, you can just, everything else feels like in more flow.
Yeah.
At least for me, it does.
Yeah, it's I think you use the word striving.
Mhm.
It really does come down to that word. And I can still catch myself striving, right?
Mm.
Um, and often this comes up in sessions a lot. And I've kind of sat with this question too. I might have a value around, let's say, excellence, right? Or quality, or, I'm a coach, but I want to be a really good coach, right? I have a value around contribution and impact. And in order to do that, I need to be good at what I do. And so how does that live with striving, right? And I've
Mm.
kind of confined myself living that value either from a place of striving or from a place of enjoyment is the word that comes up for me, or alignment. I know we use that word at our last
Yeah.
conversation. Like it's almost the fuel that is behind the behavior, because sometimes the behaviors are the same. Like I might read the book, right? I love to read. I might listen to that podcast. Um,
Mm.
and I almost have to ask myself, well, what's fueling me wanting to do it? Is it because I'm trying to get somewhere, or is it because I'm really curious and it's really how I enjoy spending my time?
Mm. Yeah, it's quite hard to know sometimes, like what is driving you, because I mean, for me, the easiest way to know is like, is it making me kind of unsettled? Is this thing I'm chasing or doing making me feel a bit unsettled? And that often helps me to understand, is it driven by my values, i.e., my values of learning and wanting to grow and just, or value of wanting to give back to others, or is it driven by my internal inner critic that says if you don't do this, you're not going to be enough, or someone's going to think bad of you? or
Yeah.
whatever. It's just because for me, this plays out in the people pleaser, which used to be a huge part of my life. It's still there, like it's never going to go, but that dominated my life for 10, maybe the last 10, 20 years, I would say, in
Yeah.
terms of like a lot of my activity and stuff and things I did were often striving, but with a level of anxiety because, oh, if I don't do it, I'll look bad or someone will think X. But it was complicated because I have a value around helping others and, you know, kindness and all of this. So you think, oh, but I'm a nice person, so of course I want to give back and do this and do that. But I think if you stop and realize, is this thing causing some anxiety? If it is, it's probably because I'm pushing too hard. I'm pushing from a place of sort of fear, I guess, or conditioning versus, you know, I guess a place of values and love and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that you kind of have to look at what's underneath it. Is it love or is it fear? If we wanted to keep it really
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And I've heard people talk about that previously. You know, that everything we do is driven love and fear, right? But the word, and depending what you read or listen to, there's lots of wording around it, but it all comes back to the same thing. You know, love. Some people say love, consciousness, mindfulness, or whatever, and fear is ego or inner critic or all these other things. But it's that light and shade. You know, that you touched on, I think, earlier.
Yeah. I'm being reminded of a client who uncovered in a session, which was quite insightful for her, that she was being hard on herself because she believed that if she wasn't hard on herself, that she wouldn't live up to the value of being a reliable person. And I think what we're saying is that there's actually a different way of getting there, right? There's a different way of living your value from a place of self-worth and self-esteem that doesn't require us to kind of punish ourselves in the process of getting there.
Yeah, I think if we're overthinking or we're overanalyzing or we're anxious, then I think we're pushing too hard, and it's almost gonna end up self-harming, even though we're doing something that we think is the right thing at the time. You end up feeling bad about it. If you end up people pleasing every day of the week for a week, you're going to feel tired, exhausted. But however, if you're living your value of serving others, giving back, but keeping yourself in balance, but doing, you know, doing stuff that you really feel is meaningful, but not then feeling like you have to do everything, all of a sudden you just feel better, I guess, essentially, right? You just feel better, you feel more aligned. And this all comes back to, I guess, our topic of the self-esteem thing. I think if you do have that self-acceptance and just self-love for yourself, truly, that then comes out in everything you do, I think. You'll start to sort of be less judgmental of others. Everything will just flow better. You know, I think often if you're judging others, you're having these negative behaviors. Often it just comes back to how you feel about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Very true. So if someone, because I'm sure with your clients and with my clients, I've had several clients coming actually wanting to work on self-esteem, wanting to improve their self-esteem, right? So how do people do that? How do we go about doing that?
I mean, I guess there's lots of different ways. It depends on the person, because some things resonate with others. And some, you know, for me in coaching, there's lots of different ways to get people to connect with their kind of inner pure self, let's call it. I don't know, pure self or authentic self. I don't know, but you know that. I think if you can connect to the inner self or the inner leader within you, that's pure, resourceful, and doesn't have all the conditioning of the society and the upbringing, you can find ways to connect to that side of yourself, and that's whatever works best for you. That's the key. Now, what works best for you is different for each person. So I've seen sometimes visualizations can help someone. You can read visualizations about how to connect with that inner authentic self. People can just get in their own world and really something will happen in the body and you'll just connect with it. And there's various ways of doing that. There's probably things online if you Google visualizations to find your authentic self or inner leader. I'm sure you can find them. Otherwise, people just like more of the structured thing, like, you know, start to write down all the voices that you hear about yourself. You know, write these down. What do you hear every day or every week? What are the familiar voices? write down what they sound like, almost give them a caricature or something, a character, start to visualize them and see them, and then start to see who you are outside of the voices.
Yeah.
It's a way of separating yourself out from these different conditioned voices that are not you.
Yeah.
And then what's left is really this kind of pure person that has the ability to really do anything, be anything, when you don't have all these voices, nattering at you constantly. That's another exercise. I mean, there's lots of things that, what is there anything that comes up for you that?
Yeah, well, what I love about what you just said is there is all this conditioning. Like, do young kids need help with self-esteem? No, right? We're born with an abundance of self-esteem, because we don't have that conditioning that's come over us, right? And so life then brings all of that thing, and then we have those voices. So I love what you said, connect with your leader within, which is a term and concept that we know from the coactive leadership model, and starting to develop that relationship with that part of you that knows, that has clarity, that is worthy in and of itself, like to start a relationship there, because people don't even know that exists and that they can start a relationship with that part of themselves. And then exactly what you said, like actually recognizing that those voices are conditioning, that they're not you. They're pattern thoughts that have come about, and naming them for what they are, having a visual identity like you suggested, like allows you to separate yourself from them. And then, I in the leader within, in the coactive model, it's self-acceptance, hand over heart, self-acceptance, and then self-authorship, right?
Yeah, self-authority, yeah.
The self-authority. And I think those are really important in self-esteem as well. Just knowing that we need to work on just accepting all of the areas that we believe that we need to work on, that are dark places or weaknesses, for full acceptance. Because I think a lot of times we fight with those voices, with those, and often the hardest work is accepting them and embracing them, so that you're not in constant relationship with them in a negative way, right? Because fighting just keeps you in there.
Yeah. I think unless you do start to do those kind of activities to understand them better, you'll always be in a cycle of just thinking, I am this or I am that. I think because we've done a lot of leadership work, coaching work, we're sort of familiar with breaking out those different parts of yourself. But if you've never done any of that, you've never read any books on personal development, you just think, oh, I am this, and I am a moody person, or I'm useless at this, or I don't know, I'm just I'm someone that, or I'm not a confident person. You just say I'm not a confident person. It's like, okay, let's start to break it down. Look at where you've been up until now in your life, and maybe even start looking at some of the events, particularly when you're younger, that might have triggered some of those feelings. And it's like, and then start to question, are they true, or is it just that one experience at school, or when I was younger, or an experience with a family member that led me to a thought or a feeling that created a level of conditioning that I've just lived out for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, And the more exploration work you do around that, you just start to learn little things and go, oh, okay, maybe that is because of that. Maybe I'm not fundamentally this person or that person. It's just all this crap has happened around me. And if I park that for a moment, what's left?
Yeah.
Okay, what's left? Who am I at the core? What do I believe in? What do I enjoy? What could I be good at? Etc. Etc. It's really interesting when you start delving into it.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of our, people that are very left brain dominant, and so much of neuroscience these days is saying just that. All of these kind of spiritual lessons that we've been knowing and teaching and learning for years and years, neuroscience is now actually showing us that that in fact is true, that these are all patterned neural connections that have been strengthened over time. And outside of those patterned thoughts that our brain is just meant to have, that there is peace and love and connection to self, right? And so it's interesting, even, you know, sometimes we talk about this stuff and it seems a little woo-woo, but if you study, and I'm certainly not a neuroscientist, but I have a huge interest in the area. And so the more I read, the more I realize, wow, there's scientific research and findings that support a lot of what we've just said.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we are familiar with some of this stuff, it is sometimes hard to see it from the perspective of somebody that isn't. And you do think, God, people think I'm crazy here. But ultimately, I would consider myself a pretty normal person, you know, or a regular person, same as you. And I know that we can talk about it because we've been through that experience of like doing that self-development work or self-assessment work, or you know, being coached by people. I mean, I did a video like years ago on LinkedIn, which I'd never done before, and I think in fact it was you that made me do it. You held me account for putting a video out about coaching because it had such an impact. And I thought at that point, when I started doing coaching or learning about coaching and I was getting coached, I thought, oh, I know everything, I'm just going to do this course and I'm quite a confident person, etc., etc. But until I actually got some coaching and I started doing some of those exercises to look inwards, I realized that, my God, I don't know myself at all, really. I thought I did, but actually a lot of it is just stuff I've put on myself as this false sense of self. When you strip it away, you go, oh God, everything feels a lot lighter and easier now that I've realized that all of those things are not really me. They're just these different outfits or something I've been wearing for so long.
Yeah, they're different thought patterns, things that pop into our mind that we don't necessarily have to believe, right? So, you know, I often say, and I remind myself that I don't actually have to like believe all the thoughts that pop into my head, and I can actually control them, right? This whole positive thinking movement, while it's helpful, it has its limitations, because trying to think positively all the time is not possible. But not believing the crap that your mind comes up with is totally possible, right?
Yeah.
So people, I've worked with people that have really debilitating inner critics. And what we tend to do, like one of the tips that I would add to your list, is when you notice the thought, recognize the thought, and then get into using one of your five senses so that you can sense your body, right? So you could either rub your hands, feel your feet on the ground. If you're in your own office, jump up and down, whatever gets you back in your body, because all you're trying to do is interrupt a thought process that has become an habitual thought process. And then to that, you can add a positive thought as well. But the interruption is really important. So I would add that to your sleep.
Yeah, I think it's really important to break the pattern in whatever way works. So I've done some of those things you've said, depending on the day or depending how I feel. It's good to have lots of options to pick up, as long as you know that all you're trying to do is, as soon as you hear the thought or the negative thoughts or the spiral of anxiety or whatever that's coming up, just as soon as you notice it, it's like, okay, I'm noticing this, right? Do something to get present, to do something to get out of this. And like you say, it's either grounding yourself, rubbing your fingers together, just breathing, just slowing down. I think for me, I do this where I like tap here and I tap quite fast, and then I gradually slow down the tapping. I don't know why. I think I've watched videos around tapping. It's a thing, but I don't do it fully. But I've noticed with myself that if I just start tapping really fast, like to mimic my brain, and then start just slowing down and gradually slowing down the tapping here until it's really slow, and then I start hearing my breath at the same speed. it really calms me down. I
Mhm.
start to get really present, and all of a sudden, all that craziness has slowed a bit, and I can go, right, what's going on here? That's
Mhm.
not me. That the thoughts are not me. What can I do now? What do I want to do from a place of clarity? And it's just easier. Again, some people might say you sound crazy, or it's a bit woo-woo, but it works. It works for me.
It does, yeah. Well, and um, from a neuroscience perspective, what's happening is that when you are in your bodily sensation, when you're you are detaching from the part of your brain that actually develops those thought patterns. You're interrupting the neural connection, and you're actually working your your brain, to calm yourself down. You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So it sounds woo woo, but there's scientific backing to explain exactly what you're doing. So I think that's
Yeah,
important to note too, that you can actually, because there's been developments in science, we can actually go and find studies that support all of this, which is great.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think also what I do that works for me. Again, there's all this wording around the light and the shade, or the the kind of unconscious mind, or the kind of runaway mind versus your clear conscious mind. And for me, I do like to separate it into one or the other. I do think we're in one mode or the other, depending on what's going on. So when I find myself in that place where something's kicking in, whether it's anxiety or overthinking,
Yeah.
I do just say to myself, okay, am I fear led or conscious led here? Which zone am I in? And I recognize, I name it, I'm in fear led. Okay, let me switch. So if I'm in conscious led, or even love led, or soul led, whatever wording
Yeah.
you want to put
Yeah.
around it, what what would I be doing? And it just shifts me onto another track, essentially. And I find that works as well. And all these things, yeah, it's just taking you back. Again, it's changing your it is related to self-esteem, because it's taking you from this place of like fear and loathing, let's say, if you're at the one end, to a place more of creativity and kind of love, compassion. It's
Yeah.
one way or the other. We just have to choose. As hard as it is, we need to find ways to choose.
I do the exact same thing. Even now, before I listen to a podcast or I pick up a book, I'll say, what part of me actually wants to do this? Is it the part that's scared I'm not good enough yet? Or is it the part
Yeah.
that's genuinely curious? And I'll share a story with you. A few years ago, my my mother-in-law wanted to take my girls to Portugal ahead of the time that we were going to go. And as she said that, I could feel myself closing up. Like I started getting nervous, my heart started racing. And for a long time, I thought, I do not want her to take them. I don't want it. And then I ultimately came to this place where I said, what part of me doesn't want her to take them? And I could tell that it was fear. I knew
Mm,
fear on all sorts of different levels. Fear of them being on a plane without me, fear of me being away from them for a long time, fear that my connection with them would be somehow hindered or compromised, all sorts of fear, right? And then I said, okay, well, it's all fear. What would love do, right? Like what would compassion do? What would, me looking back or them looking back 10 years from now, what would that
mm,
place? And ultimately, I said yes. And I said yes because I took the time to figure out which one of those was making that decision and having that reaction. And I knew that the minute I asked myself, what would love do? What would 10 years from now, what would my girls would have liked? They would have liked to have gone with their grandparents. I didn't have grandparents in my life. They had passed before I was born. The one that I met, my maternal grandmother, died when I was 2. I have very little recollection of her. And so when I connected with love, I'm like, I wish I could have had that. And so I quickly said yes, despite the fear, despite the angst of them not being with me. And to this day, I'm so happy that they had that time together. But my initial reaction was pure fear.
yeah. That's cool that you did that and recognized it. And I think that's a really good tip as well for someone that to keep it really simple, like every day. And I've genuinely done this. I might have said this on one of our previous conversations. I used to have a reminder that popped up every day in the morning. What would today be like without fear? and it might sound really cheesy to some people, but it just worked for me. Every day it pop up, and then I think it'd come up every, like, I don't know, 2 hours or something. And it just reminded me that how many of my decisions in the day are shaped by some kind of fear, like some kind of sort of, oh, I'll keep safe on this, or I won't speak out on this. Or it's like, if every day you live decided, like, I won't live with fear today. Like, if the fear comes up, I'm still going to override it. It just changes everything.
Yeah. And that would impact both self-confidence and self-esteem.
Exactly, because the more you do, the more you push over fear, a bit like what we talked about with comfort zone, the more you push out the comfort zone, the more action you take, the more you build up a sense of confidence, because as you said before, confidence doesn't just you don't need confidence to do something. Your confidence comes as a byproduct of doing something, of learning something, of growing. And the definition of confidence around your experience and skill set and all of that, you get that through time and action. So we always have to push through that barrier at the end of the day.
I know I read this somewhere. We don't need confidence, we need courage, right? When someone often will say, oh, I need confidence to do that. I don't have enough confidence to do that. In fact, you don't need any confidence to do that. You'll gain some confidence if you go ahead and do it, likely. But what you need is a little bit of courage to take that first step.
Yeah, exactly. It's action. I mean, all the stuff we're talking about is really good, and you can build up your sense of self-esteem and build this and build that. But at the end of the day, you still also need action. You still need to do something to start building and learning and growing. It's a twofold thing, and which is why in coaching, obviously, there's the element of holding accountability. You can coach somebody to really learn more about themselves and what they really want out of life and for the next step. But then you have to coach also into taking action and hold them accountable to a degree, or whatever that accountability looks like. Because without the action, you're not really evoking that kind of transformation of somebody. So it's important, even if you're not coaching, but you're just looking at your own personal development, to think about both elements. How do I grow myself internally, spiritually, but also how do I physically move forward? How do I hold myself accountable, or how can I get someone to hold me accountable for something I want to do? And yeah, all of a sudden you create the change.
And you start small, right? You start with the smallest little step and then build from there. We don't really need to know the whole process before we start. Yeah. Okay, what did we say? We said look at conscious, like being more conscious, right? Asking ourselves, is it fear, is it love that's driving this? Just being more intentional and conscious about our actions and what's driving it, what's fueling those, our behaviors. Self-acceptance, right? Just working on the relationship with that inner leader, and accepting all parts of us, whether it's the darkness or the light, our successes or our failures, right? All of it, we need to kind of accept. What else did we say, Steve?
No, I think that's kind of like a bit of that does summarize it. I think for me, the extra thing would just be to sort of, to go a level down from that, is just to sort of notice your conditioning. So it's like, try to become aware of the different voices, the different things that come up. And when we talk about self sort of acceptance, it's like not necessarily like accepting that's who you are, all these things. It's like accepting that they don't define you, these things, and like start to notice where some of those sort of negative behaviors, or the inner judgment, or the inner people pleaser, all of those things, start to notice where they might have come from, and realize, okay, yeah, I see they're there, and I can start to understand why they're there, and realize they're not truly you. They're something you've sort of inherited. They might always be there to a degree, but it's like, once you notice that, I think that's one of the biggest keys to separating out your true self, your sense of self, and therefore your self-esteem that comes from, oh yeah, I'm not that.
Yep.
There's more.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one piece that we haven't, I think we've talked about it, but we haven't named it, I think, is a level of integrity in ourselves. I think that has helps us to build self-esteem, over time as
Yeah.
well. I think when we live in integrity, and what do I mean by integrity? Doing what we'll say we'll do, being truthful, as truthful as we can be. And I say as truthful as we can be because sometimes we don't know our own truths, right? But
Hmm.
be as true as what we know in the moment, to others and to ourselves. Because
Yeah.
you mentioned people pleasing before, and I think sometimes people pleasing, and I've done that as well. Certainly, has us not live in integrity. So we do things for that we wouldn't normally want to do, and I think that, like, our self-esteem takes hits when we do those kind of things.
Yeah.
Even when we say we're going to do something like get up and work out and we don't, right? We don't keep those
Hmm.
commitments to ourselves as much as we would to our boss, or
Hmm.
to someone that we deem as important. So I think that's a shift as well, that
Mm.
helps in the self-esteem, is to start really holding your integrity as something really important to live into and protect.
Yeah, that's really important. I think for me, that's probably plays a big part in why I feel like now, at least, I have a fairly good sense, high sense of self-esteem, because I do understand my values, what I believe in, what I stand for, who I am, at that value level. And I do try actively to honor the values. I'm always thinking, now it's default, but in the past I had to really look at my values and say, how do I honor these? How am I doing? Because once you start to honor your own values, you just build up a sense of, oh, I am. It's not even just doing what I say for others, like you said, it's doing what I know is true for me,
Yeah.
and being who I am fully, rather than being this kind of constructed version that I've constructed or I've allowed other people to construct. If you start to get rid of that and go, okay, what do I actually enjoy? What am I good at? Let me start putting that out there. And this is what we're seeing, a big shift in the world generally around this whole thing of like being your true self, bringing your full self to work,
Yeah.
all of that. And that's the reason it's popular, is because they know that companies know that people that can bring their full selves to work are happier, have a higher self-esteem, make better relationships, do better work. So yeah, I really would underline exactly what you just said.
Yeah, and even in our personal lives, I mean, how many times have we gone to an event that we didn't really want to be at, right? And there's a difference between, I've had times where I don't really want to go, but I know that once I get there, I'm going to love it. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
different than I really don't want to go, and I know that once I get there, I'll still not really want to be there, but I go because I feel obligated.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of feeling in integrity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a great book by Martha Beck, who is Oprah's coach, and I forgot what it's called, but it's around integrity, and it's a great book around how she found integrity in her own life, and it's quite a story. But I know that every time I've done that, I feel a little like ding, like I haven't been truthful to myself, because I think I'm trying to be kind to someone else, and in reality, I could just in a compassionate way say, yeah, I've got other
Yeah.
plans. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to.
I've been in that same position. As I said earlier, about had a lot of people pleasing behavior, when I was younger, and yeah, I couldn't even count how many things I've done that I didn't really want to do in the past. But the more once you start to step into like your own truth, let's call it, the things you really want to do, start aligning with your values and taking actions that are based on really you and only you. It's like a snowball effect. The first few times, it's sort of like, I don't know, it feels a bit uncomfortable because you're like, well, is it me or not? Because I'm confused now because I've been acting this way for so long. But once you start to get a feeling like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing here. And then over time, the snowball builds, and all of a sudden it builds in alignment with your self-esteem, because you suddenly do feel so much better. Like you said, it's about, my God, I'm doing the things I know I want to do, and what I really feel, what I think, and you just feel relieved. I think you just feel relieved, and a sense of confidence, self-esteem, like we said.
Yeah.
So yeah, even again, I guess the lesson is that even if it feels uncomfortable to be your true self, and to just do it anyway.
Yeah, because it is part of working on self-esteem. And there's one other thing I'm going to add that we both know, because it's part of the coactive leadership I always get the map and the model mixed up.
Me too.
Which is like taking full responsibility for whatever it is that we do. I think that has a big impact on self-esteem as well, because when we run away, that I think our self-esteem takes a hit, and it builds like incredible self-esteem. It has been my experience to do the hard work of cleaning up whatever mess you've made. And you can kind of, I can think back on situations where cleaning that up and taking responsibility for my part in it, in making the mess, actually really helped my self-esteem, which seems almost counterintuitive.
I know, it's a weird one, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, yeah, that it's really important. Like taking, I think it's you are responsible for your world is a key theme around that leadership program, which it is. It's like you're not responsible for everything that sort of happened to you, because some people can get that confused. But it's like right now you are always responsible for what you create, what you put out in the world, the impact you have on others, and whether you're doing something or not doing something, you're always having some form of impact. So it's about sort of like, again, getting clear on who you really are, what you really want, and start taking responsibility and create the world around you as you want it to be.
Yeah. Anything else that we would add?
No, I think that's it from my perspective. I don't know if we missed anything important.
No, I think I can't think of anything else. I think if we were to summarize relationship with our leader within, self-acceptance, self-authorship, getting into action, using our courage to move us forward, using visualization to connect with that inner leader, knowing that those voices, that inner critic, that people pleaser, that perfectionist, that lives within us is in us, that they're pattern behaviors that are in our mind, and to the degree that we can separate ourselves from those patterned thoughts and behaviors, we can start getting closer to that inner leader and that self-esteem, living in integrity, taking responsibility for your life and for whatever messes you make, because we all make them.
Yeah. And just do one thing at a time. Like basically, if somebody's got low self-esteem or isn't familiar with some of the things we're talking about, it might seem like, oh, there's so much to do. How do I get there? Just start. Take one of the things we've talked about and just start with one. Start with getting to know yourself. Like strip away, start journaling, write down who you are. Like what are the things, those voices? Who are you when you're not listening to the voices? What is it you're craving? And then start just decide to be someone that wants to be more of you, the true you, and start to build from there. There's resources online. You can get a coach. You can do anything. There's lots of things to do. Just do something. Don't settle for feeling don't settle for being someone that's like, oh, I've got low self-esteem. You don't really. I mean, you might feel you have, but again, it's a conditioned way of thinking.
Yeah. And I would say where I would have another place where someone can start if they're more tactical, or I can't remember the word that I want to come up with, that's trying to come out, is actually interrupt the behavior. Notice the thought, get into your body and just interrupt it. If you start just doing that, notice, interrupt, come to calm and peace, and then go back to the world, notice it again. And you can do that in meetings, right? Where you're rubbing your fingers or you're touching your ear, but your attention is there. Your attention's on the bodily sensation. That will interrupt the thought process, bring you present to now and here. And the voice never exists in now and here. It just exists in the head swirling around. So
exactly. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, again, trying to simplify, I guess, what some of the stuff we're talking about. It's like our experience of life and everything is often based on our thoughts. That is it. Like if you think this way, you'll get that. It is that simple. So we're not saying, oh, okay, so just positive thinking, but just realizing that, your life experience is often based on what you think. So therefore, focus on different ways to start shifting your thoughts, and your experience will change. So just keep drilling that. Do that for 100 days. you'll change your life.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop.
Cool.
As
All
always,
right.
it's been a pleasure.
It has. See you next time, Lisa.